Hey guys, my name's Justin. Welcome to the Weekend Extra. This is Pastor Jeff Bogue.
That's right.
It's lovely being here with you. So we're in the series called Stops Along the Way, and this week you talked out of Mark 5
Right.
about Jesus interacting with this woman that would have been rejected in her culture because of a physical ailment that she had with her physical health. And you mentioned multiple times that she would have been rejected in her town and almost seen as the most rejected person in that town. And it just got me thinking about a lot of what's going on in our culture today, and I thought it's very applicable for today. So I just wanted to know, if you could expand upon that at all.
Yeah, so the Bible says she has an issue of blood, right? And so what that means was that the Bible says she bled continuously for 12 years. And in that ancient culture, it wasn't just Jewish law, although I'm sure that applied, but actually there were several, I would call them secular laws, but lots of ancient laws in the book that would say that if a woman was struggling with that she was unclean. And so she was really not free to interact publicly. She certainly wasn't free to interact with anybody that would have been considered a holy person. Okay. You would make that person unclean. She wouldn't have been really eligible to marry. In the ancient world, that's a really big deal. Marriage in the ancient world is different than marriage today. So that would have meant that she had no economic security, no social security. She wouldn't have had kids. Okay. And so that would have been a big issue for her. So basically the things in her world that would have made her safe and secure, maybe feel loved and accepted, she didn't really have access to because she had this physical problem, right? And what was fascinating to me was that those judgments were put on to her by the people around her. So, and what happens is this, is the way that the people around us treat us, we project that onto God. So if I grow up in an abused home, I kind of assume God's abusive. Or if I grow up with a really distant dad, for instance, I assume God is distant. If I grow up under a lot of injustice and prejudice, I would tend to think that God is unjust, right? Or that he doesn't care about a group of people. Yeah. And so she would have probably been projecting that all onto God, especially because the spiritual people in her life would have been the most apt to consider her to be unclean. Okay? Right. In the middle of all that, she bumps into Jesus. And Jesus' response would have been the exact opposite of everything that she would have been taught. So he turns around, he calls her daughter, which is like a term of affection.
Right, yeah.
And I just found that fascinating. Like, he wasn't offended because she didn't ask for a healing. She just touched his robe. Yeah. So he's like, she didn't ask, she didn't pay, she didn't do penance, which is what she would have been told. Yeah. She just had faith, and he loved it. He's like, daughter, your faith has healed you. And he's like, buddy, that's amazing, that you did that. And so I loved his reaction, and I loved his reaction to her desperation. I love his reaction to her rejection. And I just think it's one of it's like a pure picture of who Christ is and what he's like and what he offers people today. So
yeah. No, that's awesome. I love all that. And it's definitely, as you were talking, just picturing myself as her, how many times do I actually try to pay and try to perform to a certain level for God to help me out? But she just had faith, and he just did it. Yeah, and I think a lot of times when we think about God, I do think we think of, I think this penance idea is I did something, I did action X, so I have to do A, B, C, and D to pay for that. It's like a tax. And then I think that with our sin, we tend to hide our sin from God, or think that we do, instead of turn to God for the healing of our sin, to the freedom of our sin. And the Bible says God knows anyways, Right, yeah. But when we feel rejected, or we feel like we failed, or we feel like there's something with us, we will run from God instead of to God.
because we have this fear, like he's going to call us out or he's going to shame us or whatever. And she would have had all of that. And what she encountered was a loving God who cared about her, who honored her faith, who knew her desperation, and who brought healing and peace and freedom to her life. So,
yeah,
love it.
Completely opposite from the way that everybody else in her culture was treating her.
That's right.
Wow.
Right.
Man, that's great. Thank you so much for this great insight and for teaching us this week.
Fun.
Yeah.
It's a good conversation.
And again, I'm Justin. This is Pastor Jeff, and this is the Weekend Extra.